his sons.
All the important stuff about the U.S. Constitution is too complicated to explain to people.
Lavoy Street. This is Lavoy Street. Lavoy Street.
We'll be going all over the United States over the next few.
The bottom line here is it comes down to tens of millions of dollars donated to the Clinton Foundation and millions of dollars in speaking fees to former President Bill Clinton from former foreign governments and businesses that had business or policy issues that would somehow end up in front of Secretary of State Clinton. This is based on the book Clinton Cash by author Peter Schweitzer. We had an exclusive interview with him. There are many stories around the globe here. This first one deals with Kazakhstan, and it starts with a trip by President Clinton and one of his friends to Kazakhstan. It develops into a uranium deal that explodes, and then tens of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation from one company. Also, big speaking fees to former President Clinton from this. It all ends up with a Russia reset that perhaps is more than anyone bargained for. Consider,
I got in bed one Monday night, and my phone chimed, noisy phone, right? And I looked at it, and it was a little article that somebody sent me on the Hammonds. And there began to be this like almost overwhelming desire that I had. I think it was unbelievable to find out what in the world was going on with him. I mean, and I couldn't sleep. I got up and I studied all through the night, every article I could. I read and studied about the Hammonds because I had this urge, this desire. And then after I felt like I had a pretty good idea of what was going on, then I began to get this urge that I needed to write something. I'm not much of a writer, but I did the best I could. I was struggling trying to write, right? And then I asked the good Lord, I said, hey, if you want me to write something, then I need some help. And he did. He gave that help to me, and I was able to write what I was supposed to write. And during that writing, I found something. I had learned several things that are very impactful here, and that is one. The Lord was not pleased with what was happening today. And I apologize for being emotional. I hope you guys can get past it. The Lord was not happy with what was going on at the Hammonds, and I understood that in his writing.
Oregon cattle ranchers Dwight and Stephen Hammond are forced to serve out a 5-year federal prison sentence. As we reported earlier, they were resentenced after already having served time for convictions for setting fires back in 2001 and 2006 on lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management.
All of the allegations that were brought up to the sheriff about the fires were brought to the sheriff by federal employees. Every single one of them. Okay? And the sheriff arrested the Hammonds and charged them with multiple state charges. The district attorney of this district, of this county, reviewed those charges and decided that there was not enough evidence to charge the Hammonds. That the Hammonds, there was not enough evidence to prove that the Hammonds were guilty of anything. So he dropped them. He dropped them and he did nothing with them. He he allowed them to expire. And that was his intent, to not prosecute them. 5 days before the statute of limitation ended, U.S. Attorney's Office brought up new charges, completely different charges than what the state charges were. And these charges were terrorist charges under the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996. And then we know the rest of the story from there. They were prosecuted. There was some
what they've done is allow this issue to get to the national and international level where we can finally have a discussion about the overarching, overreaching, often arrogant federal government mismanagement, lack of management of these federal lands. We have these enormous fires. Let me boil down a few of some of what you're saying to a few words. Amanda Marshall, U.S. Attorney, she's gone. She's the one who came back demanding that the appellate court overturn the sentences of both Dwight and Steve Hammonds. She is, I mean, I think the woman should be investigated. I think she should be prosecuted for what she did to two American citizens. And I'm going to say further that the prosecution team should also, in my opinion, be investigated. This is such a lack of ethics. The trial judge, as you know, stood up and said 3 months and 1 year, and he thought you could tell from reading, at least I could, from reading the transcript, he even thought that was extraordinarily punitive.
The end of an era in Oregon politics. John Kitzhaber, who was re-elected to a fourth term last November and first took office in the state in the early 1980s, bowed to mounting pressure to resign. On Wednesday, it seemed Kitzhaber was ready to step down. He requested his designated replacement, Secretary of State Kate Brown, to fly back from Washington, D.C. to Oregon. But then it appeared he had a change of heart. Brown detailed the exchange in a statement Thursday, saying, "I asked him what he wanted to talk about. The governor told me he was not resigning," after which he began a discussion about transition. This is clearly a bizarre and unprecedented situation.
September 6, 2005, Bill Clinton shows up in Kazakhstan, where Frank Justra, a Canadian investor, has been trying to get control to buy a couple of uranium mines. And he became really partners in a way with Bill Clinton, working on philanthropic activities.
I came to him with an idea about creating an initiative to alleviate poverty.
Furthermore, Frank Justra has been involved in helping to facilitate speaking engagements for the Clintons.
Frank Justra and Bill Clinton were whisked to the presidential palace of President Nazarbayev in Kazakhstan. And it's a fascinating story because everybody walked away from the table that night with something.
The story caught the attention of Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter Joe Becker.
What President Nazarbayev got was this huge propaganda coup. Bill Clinton basically endorsed the progress that Kazakhstan had made in terms of their own democracy, which was sort of interesting given that President Nazarbayev was elected with 90+% of the vote in an election that was widely criticized as being rigged.
Bill Clinton has a public press conference with President Nazarbayev where he praises his rule and praises his human rights record. But the bottom line is, after they leave, a couple of days later, Frank Juster gets his uranium concessions, which end up being enormously lucrative to him and to a small group of Canadian mining investors.
His company was like a bit player, and really had gone from a worthless shell company overnight, got this huge uranium mining deal, and then soon after that, Bill Clinton got a huge donation, $31 million from Frank Juster to his charitable foundation, followed by a pledge to donate $100 million more.
This is Steve Brown, Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch said in a report up here in Portland that essentially that Bundy, Hammonds, and them would commit a crime. So they got to take care of the situation peacefully. We're here celebrating the life of a man that was taken care of peacefully. Loretta Lynch put a warrant for a man's death. In her own words, he never committed a crime. There was no search warrant. The Refuge was notified 4 days before the Bundys took over the Refuge by the Sheriff's Office and the FBI. They had 4 days to send all their people home on vacation. So there was no hazard of employees being harassed. Employee manager, Crash, went down there the day before the takeover and opened the door and left his personal feelings for the Refuge on the desk in the office. So the Bundys went with welcoming. It's law and it's known fact. If your doors are open, keys are on the display, open display, that it is not trespass.
I was to say this, but I was there. There's a whole stack of keys.
You found a stack of keys.
Yeah, I did. But there's keys to every place. So no doors are broken. See, there's no kicked in doors, no broken doors, no vandalism.
Was the keys accessible?
I didn't find them. There was someone else.
But things do get serious when it comes to security. And this
This place come up. Was that somebody locally
No,
that suggested that?
This has come from Hammond. We had no idea this was coming down. And Ryan didn't even have extra changes of socks.
Okay.
So anyway, then it came about that from the heart. There is just trust that this has to be dealt with. This was the place to be dealt with. And we were coming out here. If you're coming out here to come to occupy a federal place, a lot of thoughts go through your mind. And so we're driving out. I'm the rear guard, and we're coming out here, and I'm thinking, we turn crossing the Rubicon.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think we're just crossing the Rubicon. There's no going back from this. So you're wandering, you're doing soul searching as we came by, and as we're doing soul searching, there's this fence book of snow out there. Fence book is huge. All people sitting there. Went by and lifted up, blew and stopped for on across the Rubicon. And so two residents, thank goodness, got here a soul here, the doors are open, key box is open, so it's easy, nice, easy to come in, and it's been well provided, well stocked. So this is a great place to work from to try to reverse the entwinement of the federal government into the county.
So they did not trespass on the Refuge. Also, the sheriff, David Ward, called Linda as a girl and told Linda there was a convoy of guys coming down. Do not call 911. Reason being, once 911 was called, it put it in the jurisdiction of the county. When they got on the Refuge, it put it in the jurisdiction of the federal, and they could turn it over to the state. So these are some facts that's coming out by Kirk himself, the manager. And now this manager of the Refuge, if you guys really want to know who he is, the Hammonds can tell you who he is. Him and his wife is in charge of the Andrews district of the BLM. Were the ones that pressed the second charges against the Hammonds, took them to court the second time, and resentenced them to jail. The judge involved in this case and her two illustrious sons, or whatever they are, that hasn't removed the Hammonds from the Refuge campaign.
Is there any reason why you left out all the important stuff about the U.S. Constitution? Is there any reason why AYN does that?
And say a few words
Handoff in Malheur County continues. There's a newly formed group called the GOHOME campaign, Go Home campaign.
Go Home, yes. It's raising money to help groups that stand in opposition with the militants. Well, so far, the group has raised more than $20,000. Today, we're learning more about the campaign and its connection to a judge involved in the Dwight and Steve Hammond case that inspired the standoff in the first place. Brent Weisberg has more.
Over the weekend, Coin 6 News first told you about the Go Home campaign. We interviewed the co-founder, Zach Lanowski. The pledge drive has been up for 24 hours and has 550 contributors so far with $23,000 raised.
We're getting to that point where the longer the occupiers stay, the more they're going to fund gun reform. They're going to fund organizations that work to stomp out hate and bigotry. They're going to fund the Paiute Native American tribe whose land the refuge actually sits on.
But now we're learning more about Klanowski's background. He confirms to us that his mother is Chief U.S. District Judge Ann Aiken. She's the judge who re-sentenced Dwight and Steve Hammond to 5 years in prison with credit for time already served. The two have been convicted of arson. By law, arson on federal land carries a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. The trial court that did the first sentencing handed down a prison term that the government says was well below what the law required. Not only is Klanowski Judge Aiken's son, he also works for the city of Portland and is the special assistant to Mayor Charlie Hales. He tells us he's slowly transitioning out of that role. Klanowski says there's no conflict between the Go Home campaign and his mother, who he says just found out about his efforts this weekend.
She's not involved in any way. This was something that my brother Jake and I came up with.
Test is just beginning, but we will not stop, we will not back down, we will not be deterred. Make it known clearly. These buildings are very symbolic. They're a bunch of rock buildings 35 miles away from nowhere, but they're symbolic. We're holding this. It's been the federal government's fortress, their castle, and we're holding it. We shall not give it up to them ever. It returns to Harney County when it goes back.
The purpose of this is to return the resources of this land and this county back to the county, to the citizens of this state, and to this county in particular. And you need to look at this constitutionally. The federal government has no authority to own and control 1/3 of America's land mass. Yeah, I'm a rancher down there in Malheur County. They control 90% of the land down there. And they've combined all three branches of power into one: legislative, executive, judicial. And none of these people are accountable to us, the citizens there. They're not under the power of recall. And so they violate the letter and the intent of the Constitution by combining all three branches of power without representation. See, Harney County used to be the wealthiest county here in the state of Oregon. And now it is the poorest because the resources of Harney County have been seized by the federal government. We're here to allow the citizens of Harney County to reclaim their control of the resources of their county that they might once again farm, ranch, all these ranches. There was more than 100 ranchers out here that have been forced off.
I understood that what was happening to them and what was happening to the people of Harney County was a type and a shadow of what was going to happen to all people across this country if we did not stand. That was the second thing I understood. And the third, I gotta think here a little bit, but the third piece was that this was very clear. The third piece was that if the people allowed these things to continue to the Hammonds, that he would hold them accountable. And then he shared with me something else that has actually came true, and I didn't understand it at the time. But he told me that I was supposed to go to the Hammonds And I was supposed to find out some things, but he also helped me to understand. And I'm not saying that I'm getting a voice or anything, don't get me wrong, it was an understanding. But he helped me understand that through this process, the Hammonds would eventually not allow you to help me. Okay? And I found that out. I tell you those things because I want you to understand that I know without doubt that this is the issue, this is the time, and you are the people. It is now that we must stand. And if we do, and we do it right, we do not have to do it with bloodshed. We do not have to do it with anything but honor. But if we do it right, we can restore the Constitution back to this county, and it can be an example for all the other counties across this nation. And I'm telling you, I know with everything that's inside of me that the time is now, this is the place, and you are the people.
So when you hear Senator Harry Reid call the Bundy family domestic terrorists, now what you believe, whatever side you are on this whatsoever, is there any reason to call Americans domestic terrorists? No, I think what we should all be calling for is for calmer heads to prevail. I don't want to see violence on either side. There is a legitimate constitutional question here about FBI can be kicked out of this county right now. That if we had a constitutional sheriff, okay, and the people demanded that the FBI go and we resolve it here locally, he could have them gone.
For like a week, nobody could find them. And so, and
Since that one meeting down the road.
Yeah, he doesn't correspond with us anymore. And what I forgot to mention to everybody up there is that we're going to begin to put together, because the sheriff is not being responsive to the citizens out in the rural area, not coming to their aid when they say, we're being harassed by the FBI. So we're putting together a rapid response system. And I should have mentioned that to everybody. That so that when they sign these contracts, throw off the federal government, that at any time that they need somebody, they can call. And if the sheriff will not respond, we will respond. We will physically respond to come out and support and protect them. The sheriff's responsibility to do it. But if the sheriff doesn't, we will not leave these people to be intimidated like they are. So we're putting that together right now, a rapid response to provide protection for the ranchers.
They wanted the sheriff to take the Bundys? Yes. Yeah, the sheriff, Dave Ward. This man's he's talking like his britches are just a little too big. I mean, who does he think he is? He needs to keep his mouth, it seems to me. He should follow the example of the Hammonds and cut out the provocative talk. He's going to cut off the water, the power, and whatever else. I mean, this guy is not helping. And where the heck is the community when these two men, father and son, Dwight and Steve, were sentenced for a second time? It's out in its face outrageous. The congressional delegation hasn't said a word. Neither has the two senators of Oregon.
Well, but the community has spoken, and the very powerful political interests.
The sheriff of that county there in Oregon has a message to the protesters, and the message is essentially, hey, would you please go home? He's talking about the burden that this is putting on this county, and he's called in for reinforcements from other parts of Oregon, and I believe he's getting them. The police presence, I'm sure, is a big one there, and I'm sure the media presence there. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that I think the sheriff is missing the point here. Yeah, it's a burden right now, but this isn't a moment in time. This is an important message, and this small town is emblematic of ripples across the nation from coast to coast, is it not?
Yes, you are absolutely correct, and I want to thank you for your fair, balanced reporting on this, because you're right. And what is also happening is I'd like to have a message to the sheriff that he's been produced with the redress of grievance with over 100,000 signatures and ignored it, as well as the whole court system. This is a legal process that they have created this situation, not the people of Hardin County, nor the militia. This is a response of
absolute tyranny on these people.
That even though this government already owns 1 out of every 3 acres in America and disproportionately in the West, they still want to buy more land. They want to control private property around it, and they want to do it even if Congress does not okay it. In fact, the documents were how to go around Congress to implement this kind of plan. What this means for the West particularly is a stopping of our economy, more jobs will be lost. Public education, which requires property tax as well as resource taxes, would be vastly hurt in the West. It's a devastating concept, and especially when the discussion was all about how do we do it even if Congress says no.
All right, so we want to make sure that we include the response that we've gotten from the Department of Interior, their explanation for this. We have a part of that we want to show you. They say the preliminary internal discussion draft, referring to this memo, reflects some brainstorming discussions within BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, but no decisions have been made about which areas, if any, might merit more serious review and consideration. They say they're trying to be wise stewards of the land. Is that a good enough explanation for you?
No, because even though it may be brainstorming sessions, it still tells me what they're planning on doing, and they have implemented those along the way. So there are efforts to try and expand how much money they have. They want to be able, even though we have a $15 million backlog in maintaining the lands we already want, they've already passed some pieces of legislation to give them $1 billion a year to buy more property to expand what we already have. So I have seen elements of what those brainstorming sessions are in bits and pieces as they become coming through, and it still shows the same mindset. They want to cap more land, they want to control more land, they are willing to go after private property, and I'm sorry, this is devastating to the economy of the West.
When you talk about tyranny, Mike, the Obama administration, President Obama has set a record for confiscation of private land and nationalizing or federalizing 260 million acres so far in 7 years as President of the United States. I don't see anywhere in the United States Constitution where it says the President or anyone in the federal government has the right to confiscate private property and put it under the rights of the federal government, unless, of course, it's for national security. But I doubt if the 260 million acres that Barack Obama has confiscated have anything to do with national security.
It doesn't. And talk about national security, we find out through Putin, our former enemy, that who is funding and aiding ISIS. I mean, it is insanity all the way through.
Thank you, Hammond. My name is Chris Briles. I have lived here in Harney County since 1978. I joined the Burns Volunteer Fire Department in 1979. I took over as the fire chief and was over the ambulance for 24 years, well, until the ambulance moved to the hospital. I have been a servant of this community since the day I stepped on its soil. I want you to know that I haven't had a chance to prepare anything for you people. So there's nothing prepared here. It's coming from my heart. And my heart right now has been hurt. When Hammond had the meeting out at the fairgrounds, and a group of citizens from in this community said, maybe we need to have a committee of safety. Maybe we need to do some things that maybe can help some of the problems that have been going on, land grabbing, and some of the things that are not constitutionally correct. They had a unanimous that they needed to form a committee of safety. Okay, they did that. I was the second person nominated to that position. And I thought, oh my God, what happened to me? I just showed up to find out what's going on in my backyard. That's the only thing I was wanting to do. So I want to be involved in this. And I will tell you straight up, the major reason that I got on this committee to begin with was because it was said that if the committee of safety needed to, they could call in the militia. To me, at that point, it scared me. It's like, I don't want a bloodbath in my county, and if there's any committee that has the power to pull the trigger on something that causes a bloodbath, I'm going to be on that, because nobody's going to touch that trigger if I'm there. We don't need violence. We don't need bloodshed. We don't need anything other than to figure out, is there a problem? If there is a problem, what can we do to solve it? I made that commitment. Since then, I have learned a lot more about the Constitution of the United States of America, which should be first and foremost in everyone's mind, anybody's mind. It has to do with our rights. And the amendments, all of that, the history, it is so important. It is so important for everyone to understand what's going on. Okay? We have tried to have meetings. We have been told that we couldn't have a meeting at the Elks Club. We have been told we couldn't have a meeting at the senior center. That nothing having to do with the occupation of the Refuge or Bundy or anything else would be in any county buildings. Then we showed up to a meeting at the fairgrounds where the only thing that was ever spoken about was exactly what they said was never going to occur. Since it was a public meeting, we had the opportunity to speak, and our committee chairman, Mr. Tim Smith, spoke up and said that we've been blackballed within the community. The very next morning, we received an apology from Mr. Grassi saying that we could have a meeting at the senior center. Okay, fine. So we did that. People came, people spoke, people heard what was going on, people had a chance to voice their opinions and to be heard as their rights. Allow them. We've been trying to do anything and everything that we can do as the Committee of Safety to mitigate this situation, to de-escalate this situation. I want these people to be able to go home to their families. I want the law enforcement to go home to their families. I want to figure out what it is that we can do as citizens of the United States of America to retain our rights. Yes, sir. I guess that must be a bad thing. Because I was just informed just a few minutes ago by Steve Grassi that I'm an old man and I have nothing left and I'm not dangerous and that my perception is all wrong. I stand before you as a 63-year-old man and I don't feel old right now. I got scars all over me and I hurt all the time. Big deal. I am still a man and I still stand strong. After Mr. Grassi told me that, notice I'm not saying Judge Grassi. That's to me, is a respectful thing. I say Steve Grassi told me my perception was wrong. I asked him for a piece of paper. I have been the county fire chief here since 1984. I have served, I have worked with the Bundys, I've worked, or not with the Bundys, I'm sorry, with the Hammonds. I've worked with ranchers all over this community to help with fire prevention, to help with control burns, to do what I can to help my fellow man. I took a piece of paper and I wrote down the address, or not the address, I'm sorry. Folks, I'm a human. I need to remind myself that I'm human and I don't always say the right thing. But I took and I wrote down the date and I said, I, Chris Allen Brile, do hereby resign my position as the Harney County Fire Chief. Okay? Does that mean when you quit, who do you quit? That might say that I just quit this county. I did not just quit this county. But I will not work for a government or a person that I do not believe in and have faith in. Or, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will not work for somebody that I don't trust. Hell no. I will stand before you and tell you the truth. Do not ever ask me a question if you don't want to answer. I've been told by Steve to distance myself from this committee of safety. I've been told that we don't know what we're doing. I've been told that my life is in danger. I've been told all kinds of things. I will not be told what to do. I have my own mind, and I will use my own mind, not somebody else's. And I feel that the people in this county, in this state, in this United States, have the right to free speech and the right to assemble and the right to figure out if there's a problem, what can be done about it.
In his speech last night, he revealed he's got a bombshell coming next week on Hillary's dealings with her foundation. Roll that tape, please.
Hillary Clinton turned the State Department into a private hedge fund. The Russians, the Saudis, the Chinese all gave money to Bill and Hillary and got favorable treatment in return. It's a sad day in America when foreign governments with deep pockets have more influence in our own country than our great citizens.
All right, Judge, that's a straightforward statement of conflict of interest involving the Clinton Foundation. And you say what?
Most people have probably forgotten that there are two criminal FBI investigations of Mrs. Clinton. The secret server in her house, the email scandal, which we talk about all the time because it involves the failure to protect, the alleged failure to protect national security secrets, and the one Donald Trump mentioned, which is actually a team of FBI agents looking at allegations of public corruption. If I may amplify what Donald Trump said, and I would refine it slightly, I wouldn't call it a hedge fund, I'd call it a slush fund, which obviously is worse. The allegations are that she exercised the sovereign power of the Secretary of State given to her under the statutes so as to benefit her and her husband's pocketbook by doing favors for foreign governments and foreign countries and then receiving from those persons and countries substantial, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in contributions to the Clinton Foundation / slush fund.
Now, that's not necessarily illegal, but it is highly political, isn't it? That's the point.
It is illegal if her decisions as Secretary of State were influenced by her knowledge or the high probability of her knowledge that the contribution would be coming.
Is that what the FBI is looking at?
Yes, that's exactly what the FBI is looking at. Look, there are some extreme, I'll give you the most extreme example, involves her husband's friend, Frank Giustra, Giustra, a Canadian, who asked Mrs. Clinton as a foreigner for permission to own shares in a uranium mine in Utah. Secretary of State has the permission. She granted the permission. He sold 80% of his shares to Vladimir Putin. The Russians now own this uranium mine in Utah. He then gave $145 million from the proceeds to the Clinton Foundation. Now you're raising your eyebrows. Anybody's eyebrows would be raised listening to this. Admittedly, I've given you one of the more extreme examples of this. There are many others. This is really perhaps the most incendiary of them.
It's $145 million goes into the Clinton Global Initiative or the Clinton Fund, whichever the correct name is.
Correct.
And part of that money came out of the proceeds of the sale of a uranium mine in America to Vladimir Putin.
Now, again, not to Putin himself, but to a sovereign entity owned by the Russian government. Absolutely.
Well, it's all the same thing.
In that case, it is, yes. So how can she possibly explain that or justify that kind of judgment? So Trump's argument is this is the mentality that is that is putting herself out for the White House. Do you want this same corrupt mentality as president that we had as Secretary of State?
And a lot of people are talking about that, and not only the United States, but other countries. People want to take their country back. They want to have independence in a sense, and you see it with Europe. All over Europe, you're going to have more than just, in my opinion, more than just what happened last night. You're going to have, I think, many other cases where they want to take their borders back. They want to take their monetary back. They want to take a lot of things back. They want to be able to have a country again. You just have to embrace it. It's the will of the people. And, it's not a question of approaching it. It's the will of the people. It's always the will of the people. Ultimately, that wins out.
This contest is just beginning. So we will not stop. We will not back down. We will not be deterred. Make it known clearly.
Hillary Clinton was doing business with, and they sent money to the Clinton Foundation.
That's exactly right. You have to look at the timing of those. The uranium one
is a great example of this. What was going on between the U.S., Canada, Russia? How did Clinton play into that? How did the Clinton Foundation play into this? How did they end up with these contributions from some of the players in that deal, in that regard?
So she sent 25% of the U.S.'s uranium to Russia, and then Russia sent money to the Clinton Foundation.
Here's what should happen, in my opinion, Congressman. You and the rest of the congressional delegation ought to be on the phone to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oregon. You should be intervening in this case. And anyone who says it's a criminal case and that's inappropriate is a damn fool. Because the reality here is these are two men who are in jail, and it is every minute they spend in jail is an injustice, and it is one that should not be tolerated in this country.
Now, Lou, I'm not an attorney. I was a journalism major. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. This has already been appealed to the Ninth Circuit and to the U.S. Supreme Court, who refused to take it. The Ninth Circuit said, no, you have to impose the statutory 5-year.
Well, they're damn fools. And it's about time people, whether they're attorneys or not, whether you're a congressman or a senator, it's time for people in this country to talk straight. They're damn fools, and they don't give a damn about 2 American citizens. And it's got to stop, and it's got to stop soon, because this is so outrageous, so obviously outrageous.
I wasn't sure about these signings that are happening. Is that people who are signing on to have a piece of the land here?
No,
or
but
people
they're
who are
doing
saying we reject the government?
No, they're already here, and they're saying we're throwing off the Forest Service and the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, will no longer be ruled by them. And so we've got this is pretty big. This is a big deal. When they sign that, they'll be sending it to the Solicitor General. That letter, and that letter doesn't get lost. And it usually comes back from the FBI holding it in contempt. That's what they did with my son.
It basically says we're rejecting your authority over us.
Absolutely. And
how many people have already?
We've got 2 right now. One here.
Individual ranchers.
Yeah, one rancher here and one coming from New Mexico. I hope they bring a couple more in tow. Right now, you only have 2 ranchers that have done it in the whole country. Ivan, Bundy, and myself. And so now that's going to double it in one day. And so there are so many right on the edge. They are so intimidated with what's going on by the federal government that there's a lot of trepidation. Listen up.
This is how I expect that the entire system, okay, will try to resolve it. Is that they will try to suppress the truth about what I just told you. That we, the people, have the power in this set of circumstances here, with respect to Hardy County land, with respect to this local community, all residents, no matter, just in this general area, with Oregon, the entire state of Oregon. Okay? The truth is, and they never wanted to get to here in Oregon. The truth is, if the people found out about this right here, okay? Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 17. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me right now. This land right here was seized, and ranchers have been kicked off of it since 1908. Over 100 ranchers, as Bundy has said, right? He wants to restore that back to, okay, and his family, the Bundy family knows about these issues. His family is now at this point in time wanting to help other families. And other families are other ranching families who had no idea what I'm about to share with you right here. They didn't know. They didn't know that the federal government can't come in and just kick them off the land. They can't do it because of Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 17. In summary, at the top portion of it, okay? And you can go read it, all right? But here's how the paragraph starts, and I'll explain it to you. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. That paragraph right there is paragraph 17. But essentially what it says is that you must, by the acceptance of the Congress, okay? Congress must approve, okay? And the local legislature, state legislature, must approve the purchase of land, okay? And it must be purchased for fair market value, all right? And I'm trying to simplify it here. And guess what else? They can only do it, ladies and gentlemen, for the specific purposes as follows. For the erection of forts, military bases, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, okay?
It is fighting imminently to keep us from having access to buildings, to have daylight shed on things. And so I personally believe, from the documents that I have seen, that there is great corruption here. You know, you ought to follow the money. There's great wealth that's locked up. On my ranch, particular in Arizona, the greatest mineral wealth in the world is on that. And so why do they lock that off? And why do they keep those resources from the people?
So what happened to Justra's company that benefited from that deal in Kazakhstan? After a merger, it became a uranium giant called Uranium One. And then the Russians bought it.
Uranium One became very active in acquiring uranium assets actually in the United States itself. By 2008, 2009, they were a particularly attractive target for the Russian government.
And the Russians acquired that target.
They would acquire what amount to 50% of projected uranium output by 2015.
In other words, Russia now controls what was projected to be up to half of America's uranium. Our calls to Uranium One were not returned.
Now, does Secretary Clinton factor into this? For that deal to go through, it needs federal government approval, and one of those people that has to approve that deal is Secretary of State Hillary Clinton,
who, as Senator Clinton, was vigorously opposed to these kind of buys from countries into U.S. property.
That's a great point, Brett. You remember the Dubai ports deal, for example, which he was opposed to.
We believe that no foreign government should control our ports.
In this particular case, we're talking about uranium. We're talking about things that relate to the nuclear industry. We're talking about the Russian government,
which already provides equipment material to Iran.
That's correct. The problem is that Hillary Clinton's family foundation, the Clinton Foundation, was receiving tens of millions of dollars from shareholders in Uranium One who wanted the Russian government to acquire them because it would be a financial landfall.
So what this amounts to, in the end, is a Russian company, essentially controlled by Vladimir Putin, will now be in charge of a substantial portion of American uranium. Russia sends uranium to its client state, Iran. So American uranium could well be sent to the very nation we're negotiating with to try to slow its ability to develop a nuclear weapon. Thus, we see how far-reaching the effect of the Clinton blur, as Schweitzer puts it, can be.
Begin by saying thank you to all of you across the country who have volunteered your time, donated what you could, signed up at HillaryClinton.com. You have voted to make Hillary Clinton the nominee of the Democratic Party. This is your victory. And to everyone who supported Senator Sanders, this is your victory too. I've known Bernie since I was a young staffer for Senator Pat Leahy, and he was mayor of Burlington. He stood up to the special interests and fought to give working people a fairer economy and a bigger say. And those are the same values that he brought to this campaign, and our party and our country are better for it. Donald Trump has different values. He built his career by ripping people off, stiffing contractors, and skipping out on his bills through bankruptcy. He is too erratic, dangerous, and divisive to trust to the White House. You know, I'm a fortunate grandson of Italian and Greek immigrants with a blue-collar dad and a pink-collar mom. I've had the honor to serve two great presidents.
should also be clarified. They're not trying to, shouldn't be presumed or presented as freeloaders. The money stays in their county and in their state. They're all for their fair share.
They're a poll agency like myself. In lieu of what I used to pay to Grace, I'm asking the county commissioners to put in a production tax so I can support the local government.
But the county government doesn't seem like it wants this land.
No, they want the money. Where does the money come from? Forced down to their low hand.
After a new report suggests she may have helped advance Russian espionage. It began in 2010 as part of a reset of U.S.-Russian relations that included a nuclear weapons treaty. President Obama said then-Secretary of State Clinton would direct the exchange, along with her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov.
I think it's great that Russia is looking to try to create that kind of center for technology and growth right outside Moscow, and we want to help because we think that it's in everyone's interest to do so.
According to leaked diplomatic cables, Russia had actively been looking for U.S. private and governmental assistance with a project dubbed Skolkovo, a Russian equivalent of Silicon Valley. A message from the U.S. ambassador to Russia in February of 2009 showed that Russia wanted concrete results, such as exchanging technology and creating joint ventures with the United States. A cable from November of 2009 said that Russia had everything in place to create the technology hub and only needed investment. That investment came in the following months, as Cisco Systems pledged $1 billion to go towards the development of the massive complex, with the company's vice president saying it represented a good opportunity.
What is encouraging for us as a global company is the top-down commitment that we see from the President Medvedev down.
Google and Intel were quick to follow. In time, the new research facility developed further, with the Russian government promising American firms special access to Russian projects and special tax status. The State Department also heavily encouraged companies to participate, and many of those involved had close connections to Clinton. The co-chair of a group working on investments was Robert Hormats, a close friend, donor, and advisor to Clinton, while yet another official served on Clinton's finance committee during her 2008 campaign. Many of the corporations involved in the project also had ties to the Clintons. A 2012 report identifying key partners found that of 28 partners, 17 had donated to the Clinton Foundation or paid for speeches. It is unknown exactly how much was donated by these corporations to the foundation, but disclosures say it is anywhere from $6.5 to $23 million. Many of the Russian officials involved in the project are also reported as making donations to the Clinton Foundation. In time, the U.S. government's position on the Russian project soured. In 2014, the FBI raised red flags about Skolkovo, warning companies the tech center could lead to Russians trying to access sensitive and classified research. That same year, the U.S. Army and FBI said they believed the project had helped advance Russia's military technology, and U.S. corporations could unwittingly help in corporate espionage. Analysts say one of the biggest concerns is that Russia could obtain and use nanotechnology against the United States. Key figures involved with Skolkovo claim allegations of spying are false and say all the project's operations are transparent. But as Clinton continues on the campaign trail, this latest report continues to cast doubts on Clinton's time at the State Department. Nicholas Kelgart, One America News.
Speaking with Brian Bundy. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? I'm doing all right.
Man, I'm doing quite well. I'm here to ask questions that I don't think the mainstream's reporting. So here goes. You guys have come here, I'm assuming, to petition your government for redress of grievance, correct?
Well, we already did that, and they ignored it. And so the petitions have been put out. Petition of redress of grievance was put forth. And that, along with so many other things that we did prior to this, have been ignored, completely ignored, and so that's why we're here.
Okay, so if people wanted on the internet to go and find these redress of grievance, because what I feel is you guys' message is being lost by all the sensationalism. Can you tell me or tell my audience where they can go online to look at this stuff, these past redresses that have not been gotten back to you by the government?
Sure, go to the Bundy Ranch blogspot, and I believe that's bundyranch@blogspot.com, something like that.
Okay.
And everything is put on there. Might have to go back a little bit because most of that redress and grievance information was done in December, November and December. And because of those ignorings is why we're here today.
Okay, so what do you want to accomplish? What is your end goal? What's your end game at being out here?
Number one, the Hammonds need to be released from prison and restored. You know, their convictions and even their prosecutions were completely illegal. Those people did not commit crimes, and they need to be restored to their life and liberty. The second goal is we are here to restore the Constitution, particularly concerning the land ownership, this land. The Constitution simply does not allow the federal government to own large tracts of land for purposes other than military bases, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. And yet they've been claiming for years, you know, Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, etc. They're just not constitutional. And you can't stop those people.
Well, I just wanted
that's who I'm going with.
Okay, well, I didn't know noise.
I know.
Oh, no, that's just part of the flavor.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, no, I'll edit this stuff out.
Bring them over here. Tell them to come because I'm going with them. Okay. So what else? What's your last question?
My last question is simply this. There's a lot of controversy. Like anytime ranchers or people that are white have an issue with land rights with the federal government, the media throws the fact that it was all once Native people's land out there as in my humble opinion, it has to do with trying to squash your argument. What's your thoughts on that? Have you tried to reach out to Native folks and talk to them and make them part of the dialogue, or have they got back to you? Have they responded?
They have not. In fact, they have not responded. But yes, we have contact.
Okay, well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
I'm out here trying to figure out what's going on the streets of Burns and out in the deserts of Oregon. I haven't got time to go chasing these political guys. They're not important to the story.
Yeah, they sure aren't, because they haven't been a part of it, and that's a shame for Steve and for Dwight Hammond and their family.
Well, you know, run down on how they are tied and what they have behind this conflict of interest. And here we go. Callister, she's the editor of Blue Mountain Eagle. And I interviewed some of the people around here, and they're terrified. You folks think that this is what they should do? Because when we're talking to militia, and I'm an embedded reporter for 3%ers, and there's really no threat there. So we could talk to the officers.
As you drive up the highway here, you'll pass a cemetery. As you pass the cemetery, I'm going to show you what you'll see out there. You'll see a headstone. And on that headstone is my dad's name. I have a picture of it here, but I'm not finding it. But yeah, Dr. Red served the community here for over 30 years. Loved everyone here. I talked to him many times about it. He was dedicated to his job. He was dedicated to his family, and he was dedicated to his religion that he loved more than anything. And in 2009, June 10th, 2009, about 6:45 probably, the BLM and the other people came to my dad's house to raid it. And why did they? I've been working on it for 5 years since it happened. I know a whole bunch about it. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to share the story of what really happened. If you read in the papers, that's not what happened. Okay, they don't tell the full story. Real quickly though, most people in Blanning don't really know why they arrested Dr. Red. But guess what? I know why they arrested him. I have a picture of it. You gotta look real close. Can anyone see that? The little teeny bead. Your bead. Half the size of it. Actually, it's smaller than half the size of a dime. Okay? That's why Dr. Red was arrested. I have all the information about it. You'll read in the paper, oh, it's an effigy bird pendant. Oh, man, it must have been worth a lot. Was it made of gold? No, it wasn't. It's a little teeny bead. That's why he was arrested. Okay, that's why we have a lawsuit against them for the wrongful death of Dr. Red. And look at it online. You can look it up. There's not much media attention about it. There's a whole lot of media attention beforehand, but then afterwards, after we have a lawsuit, they all run away. I don't know. They just don't want to talk about that part anymore. But you know what? My dad's still, his body's still buried up there in the cemetery. I know how hard it is from the articles that I read. It's very difficult to get a doctor in here to stay, like Dr. Red. In the words of Senator Hatch, he said to Eric Holder, you know how hard it is to get physicians doing what he was doing to come into this community. Now they've removed him. He's not here anymore. And the only reason he's not here is because of how he was treated by the BLM. It's not a secret. It's in our lawsuit. Who knows his name?
Daniel.
Who?
Daniel Pilo.
I didn't say it. Everyone knows it. Look it up online. But I want you to know. Go ahead.
Same one was heading up the operation against his Bundy family down there.
Yep. Same guy. Yep. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
I'm here, making a plea to you. You ranchers, here, I'm asking you on this Saturday, take action. We're having a signing ceremony. You have ranchers coming clear from New Mexico. When courage and strength is going to come there, and down there at the new Harmony County Community Resource Center, he's going to go to meet you. He is going to sign this cancellation contract. He's going to cancel this contract. That's going to send this with the Genesis. Have a rancher here in Harmony County that's going to be in before him. Is going to sign that cancellation of that agreement between him and the federal government, saying that I will now run my ranch myself. That means the crossing of the stream. That is when you say, I have made the commitment that I now cross from the goal to contractual agreement to a free rancher running on my free ranch. I have done it. Bundy has done it. Tomorrow or Saturday, it's going to double. We'd like to see that multiple. We invite you to be there. Even if you're not quite ready to sign it, maybe you'll catch the spirit at that moment. Or maybe you will now. Now is the day. Now is the time. Are you going to wait for tomorrow? For next week? Next month? Next year? When? When will you stand up? If not now. Do not worry how big Goliath is. You must be willing to put everything on the table for freedom. If you are not willing to put everything on the table for freedom, are you worthy to have freedom? Our founding fathers laid everything upon the line. Their life, their sacred honor, their fortune. And we have been the beneficiaries of these great sacrifices without a lot of bloodshed in our country. Will you now at this time, when this day has come again, sit down, or will you stand up? Will you have the courage to stand up there and cancel that agreement between you and the federal government and say, I do not care how big Goliath is. If I be only one, I am yet one, and I shall stand. I promise you that if you stand, others will stand with you. If you stand, God will stand with you. But God cannot stand with you if you do not stand. He is waiting for you to stand first. He will not force you to stand. He will not stand for you, but He will stand beside you. And when you commit to stand, I promise you, angels of heaven will stand with you. It does not matter how big the giant. It does not matter how big the contest. It just matters that you stand. I beg of you here in Harney County, stand. Mexico is starting to stand. Father is stood. Your boys are standing. I am standing. My daughters, my sons are standing beside me. There's much I have to look for that I don't want to lose. I have 19 grandkids and 2 on the way. My daughters all made a quick trip here because they didn't know if they'd see their dad again. But they stood beside me. They hugged me, they cried, and said, Dad, we're proud of you. You want your kids to do the same. It's not for your grandkids to do. It's not for your children to do. It's for you in this room to do now. If you do not do it now, you will have lost your opportunity in the course of the history of the world. It's for the common man to stand up. happened Tuesday, not only that the shooting, but the operation of security individuals on Tuesday as posted earlier.
In any operation, there's a group of leadership that's running the show, so to speak. And at this juncture, it appears that those who would be in a leadership position will be off the refuge and traveling elsewhere. And we took the opportunity to affect the right.
They loaded them into the vehicle. So there was, all of us were in the vehicle now, and we had to sit there for hours. And I don't understand why. We were there probably for about 5 hours. When we were sitting in the back of the van, I asked them if we were under arrest. And they kept saying, no, you're just being detained. I said, for what? Are we being, so what are you charging? I mean, are you going to charge us with something? We didn't have any idea. And when we got into the van and everybody was in the van, we kept saying, are they charging you? Are we under arrest? They kept still saying, nope, you're just being detained. And there was about 40 people, 40 of these people in their garb, in their, I don't know what you call it, battle rattle, whatever they call it. But anyway, they were all down the road and they were all trying to get it together. And it was almost like they were trying to formulate some reason that they picked this up or what they were going to charge us with or whatever it was going to be. I don't know, because it took a long, long time.
Ruptly said in a report up here in Portland that essentially that Bundy, Hammond, and them would commit a crime. So they got to take care of the situation peacefully. We're here celebrating the life of a man that was taken care of peacefully. Loretta put a warrant for a man's death. In her own words, had never committed a crime. There was no search warrant. The refuge was notified 4 days before the Bundys took over the refuge by the sheriff's office and the FBI. They had 4 days to send all their people home on vacation.
So he only got to the end of it, and he said he only got to the first vehicle, and he got some of that shot, but nobody could hear or see because we were up around the bend. They could not hear the shots, and they couldn't see anything. So whatever Mark said, he has no idea because he was not there. And all of them stated that they could not hear or see any of the shooting because it was up around the bend, and because of maybe the snow and the trees or whatever and we were probably a mile or two from them, and they could hear nothing.
Go ahead and shoot me. I'm not turning off the vehicle. I got Ryan Bundy in here. This is Lavoy Finicum. I'm going to go meet the people in Daytown, in Grant County. You want to shoot me? You shoot me. I'm going to meet the sheriff. The sheriff is waiting for us. So you do as you damn well please. But I'm not going anywhere. Here I am, right there. Right there, put a bullet through it. You understand? I'm going to go meet the sheriff. You back down or you kill me now. Go ahead. Put your bullet through me. I don't care. I'm going to go meet the sheriff. You do as you damn well please.
And the FBI also issued a statement saying they are helping the sheriff as well, and they are taking the lead.
Well, I'm going to ask them if they want to go out. Yeah, now? Who are you? Yeah, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Okay, well, I'm going over to meet the sheriff in Grant County. You come along with us. Nick Office is over there. You can go ahead and shoot me. Put the laser right there. Put the bullet through the head. Hey, boys, it's going to get real. You want my blood on your hands? Get it done, because we got people to see and places to go.
Approximately 4:25
on Tuesday, January 26th. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and Oregon State Police began an enforcement action to bring into custody a number of individuals associated with the armed occupation of the Malheur National Refuge. During that arrest, there were shots fired. One individual was the subject of a federal probable cause arrest is deceased. We will not be releasing any information about that.
You mentioned that OSP and FBI were together in this fire shops with OSP or FBI. Where state troopers were wanted.
And Ryan Payne told Lavoy that they were coming up fast and that he should probably slow down there. It looks like they're pulling us over. Lavoy said, no, we are going to John Day. We have a meeting with the sheriff and we're going to get to John Day. And they realized that it was a kind of a setup. And so Ryan Payne talks to Lavoy and saying, look, dude, you need to kind of slow down. You better pull over because they're gaining up on us. So finally, reluctantly, Lavoy slows down and pulls over. And he didn't pull very far over because it's a snowy road. But he slows down and he stops. And Ryan Payne rolls down the window and he sticks both hands out the window and he yells back at I'm guessing whoever it was with the flashing light. And he yells back at him. It hadn't been 2 seconds probably, and his hands are out, and a shot comes through and misses his hands. I thought it hit him, but it hit the mirror, the little thing between the mirror and the window, and so that was the first shot fired, and he yanked back in really fast, and he goes, "Wow, they're shooting at us." Well, it was unbelievable. I'm like, oh.
A new video has been released showing the fatal police shooting of a militia member in the state of Oregon in January. Lavoy Finicum was part of an armed group that occupied a national wildlife refuge during a dispute over land rights. I should warn you the following footage contains graphic images.
Stay down.
Are they shooting him?
All right, let's take a closer look at the video. As Finicum, who was in the driver's seat, walks out of the truck, you can hear 2 shots being fired. Oregon police say these rounds were fired by FBI officers but missed. The agents never reported the shots to investigators. That prompted a federal inquiry into the FBI's actions.
Are they shooting him? Shoot him.
And the 3 fatal bullets which hit Lavoy Finicum in the back were fired by local police and not the FBI. Despite the poor quality of the video, officers claim it's possible to make out the activist reaching for his gun moments before he died. All right, we'll show you an image now of the handgun police say Finicum tried to pull on them. We spoke to his widow, Jeanette. She does not believe the official account of events.
I believe at that moment, because you notice that he kind of takes a little jolt, and I believe that he was reaching to his left because he had already been shot, and so I believe he was reaching into a wound, and he had empty hands. There was no gun in his hands. If you notice that when he indeed was leaving that truck with his hands in the air, he had a choice. He could have had a gun on him, or he could have pointed a gun at someone else when they were indeed pointing guns at him, but he did not.
And she kept screaming, "I'm an EMT, let me help him and let me get out and cover him up," but you can't hear anything because I'm sure they probably couldn't hear her because we were dodging lasers and bullets that were coming through the windows, and I am and I'm trying to hold her down because I see the laser on her knee, and I'm trying to push her knee down. I'm trying to push his hat down. We're trying to keep away from the lasers that are coming in, and they had no intention to let up on us. They had already killed him, and I'm still videoing, but I can hear the noise. You can hear everybody what we're saying. You can hear the things that are happening, and in the window next to my head, as I see, we have been hit. We got hit 4 or 5 or more times on that window, and it didn't break the window. That was totally amazing to me. But we were sitting there praying. That's what we were doing. We said, we got to pray, we got to pray. And so we're offering a prayer of protection. Please, Father, protect us. And it went on for a long time. It seemed like 5 to 10 minutes. I don't know how long it was, but there was no way for us to get out. They just wouldn't let up. And so finally, she throws herself across Ryan. She sticks her hands out as far as she can reach, and she screams, "Stop, stop, stop!" And I start yelling, "Stop!" And finally, they quit. And then they said, "Tell Ryan to get out," or they said, "Tell the man to get out." I don't think they knew that it was Ryan Bundy. And he got out, and he said, as he got up, he said, "I got hit in the shoulder," and it was in his right shoulder, and so then she had looked at it and said, "Yeah, you're hit." And then he got out, and immediately they backed him up and took him in. Then they looked at Ryan and said he'd been shot, Ryan Bundy, and so they called an ambulance, and then the ambulance came, and during all this time,
You mentioned that OSP and FBI were together in this fired shots at OSP or FBI.
Florida State Troopers were the ones that fired the weapons.
Okay, and are you state police or sheriff? Are you state police or sheriff?
We are here supporting the sheriff and our
Police or sheriff?
We are here supporting the sheriff and
Or sheriff?
We are here supporting the sheriff and
So are you a police officer?
Shoot me. I'm going to meet the sheriff. The sheriff is waiting for us. So you do as you damn well please. But I'm not going anywhere. Here I am, right there. Right there, put a bullet through it. You understand? I'm going to go meet the sheriff. You back down or you kill me now. Go ahead, put the bullet through me. I don't care.
Where's Ryan?
I'm going to go meet the sheriff. You do as you damn well please.
What for?
Well, I'm going to ask them if they want to go out.
What for? Where are we
You
getting
want out?
What for? Where are we getting
Who
out?
are you? Yeah, who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
Oregon State Police.
Okay.
And are you state police or sheriff? And are you state police or sheriff? Are you state police or sheriff?
we are here supporting the sheriff.
And the FBI also issued a statement saying they are helping the sheriff as well, and they are taking the lead.
In the last 50 years or so, there's been a disturbing growth of a fourth arm in our government. That's the bureaucratic branch. This branch of our government has become huge and unaccountable to anyone.
Well, I'm going over to meet the sheriff in Grand County. You're coming along with us. And your talk with us over there.
One quickly, I called my wife, we stayed at the Refuge last night, got in there yesterday, and that was been really had a great meeting. Yeah, good, great plans, I'm sure those plans will still move forward. But I called my wife to check in, and I said, I feel like I'm standing on the freest piece of ground in America today, standing out of that refuge. It was freedom there. And we continue to move forward, and we continue to fight. We can have that feeling all over this country, especially the Western United States. We can stand on our ground in public lands and feel free. That nobody's watching over our shoulder and get arrested because we stepped on some stupid mouse. So we'll keep up the fight and we'll get there.
My name is Ed Snipes. I'm from Harney County. And I told the sheriff that I wasn't going to say anything tonight. I just wanted to come and listen. But if you don't want to hear what I've got to say, you raise your hand, I'll sit down. I didn't see one hand come up. All right. We've had a peace-loving man. And I say that because I know the people that were at the refuge. I went down there several times. Right? My phone has been bugged for 3 weeks.
I know. Mine too.
All right? Those people were coming up here tonight to join you. And I'm going to tell you right now, you cannot stand alone. Harney County cannot stand alone. We have to lock arms all the way across this nation. I cowboyed in South Florida for 26 years. I cowboyed in Idaho in the mountains for 11 years. I've been in Harney County for 8 years. I have been across this country and been to several states where I have worked in short periods of time. This is happening from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. I, for one, will come and lock arms with you anytime you need me. Those people coming up here tonight were coming up here to support you, not try to rule over you, to show you that they would stand behind you in whatever you chose to do. They were ambushed. All right, they were ambushed by the federal government, who has absolutely no jurisdiction within this sovereign state. The only jurisdiction they have is from our borders out. And if you don't believe me, study the Constitution. We just spent 2 days studying the Constitution with a constitutional scholar. Okay, I didn't know all of that stuff, but I know right from wrong. And I've made this statement before. I don't need the Constitution, and I don't need the 10 Commandments to tell me the difference between right and wrong. It is obvious. And we need to stand together all the way across this nation. We have another sheriff, like your sheriff, in Josephine County, who's trying to take up for his people. What do you think they're going to do to him? They're going to do the same thing. This was quite a coincidence, wasn't it? That they got ambushed when they were coming up here. The best way to suppress you was to ambush these people. And we've had a good man killed tonight. And I'll guarantee you, he didn't start it.
We can still skip it and accomplish our mission. I mean, this isn't our mission, right, sir?
Well, that's what you want to do, publish. So leave it here so they can ambush the next company that comes along.
No, sir, that's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying it seems like an unnecessary risk given our objective, sir.
Our objective is to win the war.
Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could do war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event, the Constitution be damned? What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country, but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes, to love your country, you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right?
We're not
What if that
anti-federal
government is
government.
best which governs least?
I believe in
What
the
if
federal
I'm
government.
right?
We believe in
What
the
if the
federal
government
government.
is
We
wrong?
need the federal government.
What if it is
Federal
dangerous to
government
be right when the government is
specific
wrong?
responsibility.
What if it is better to perish
From our border
fighting
secure.
for freedom
Defending our
than to
nation.
live as a slave?
Keeping commerce regular.
What if freedom's
And just a
greatest
few other
hour of
narrowly
danger
defined things. So I'm going
is
to say that again. We are not anti-government.
Want to neutralize a lot of threats before they even happen. But the punishment usually came after the crime. Can't afford to wait that long. Wait. After New York, I convinced the World Security Council we needed a quantum surge in threat analysis. Once we're way ahead of the curve.
By holding a gun to everyone on Earth and calling it protection.
You know, I read those SSR files. Greatest Generation? You guys did some nasty stuff.
Yeah. Compromised. Sometimes in ways that made us not sleep so well. But we did it so that people could be free. This isn't freedom. This is fear.
S.H.I.E.L.D. takes the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be. It's getting damn near past time for